Welcome to the Take Charge of Change podcast. In this podcast, we'll help you to lead a more resilient professional and personal life by sharing great content to make you smarter, more energetic, emotionally healthy, financially confident, so you accomplish your professional and personal goals in spite of the challenges that are sure to come your way. This podcast is a continuation of the reflections and observations from the great book titled Resilience by Eric Greitens. In the last video, we left off with the quote, "Humans before hardware," a saying often used by the Navy SEALs. In other words, you can never replace the teamwork, inspiration, and wisdom that comes from relationships. And the hardware and technology should always be at the service of our relationships and the teams that we lead. In this podcast, we will discuss habits, a topic that we've often discussed in previous podcasts, but is a critical element to resiliency. Your life has a natural trajectory. Your life flies in the direction of your habits, the current constellation of rituals. To change the direction of your life, you need to reset your habits. You know, we look at history, and so often it's portrayed as a great moments, wonderful moments that turn the tide. But in the real world, our lives are made up of a lot of little moments. Our paths are forged by thousands of days and thousands of decisions. Our life builds on an accumulation of events. Now, we like to believe in the magic of sudden turnarounds, magical experiences. There's dramatic examples like the Apostle Paul on the road to Damascus and his conversion experience. But like I said, real change is a marathon, not a sudden event or a sprint. You know, the reality is that when things get really hard and there's fear or pain, anxiety, pressure, we'll always fall to the level of our current habits, the current level of training in the midst of those circumstances. In the end, it's about changing our habits, and changing your habits is about the simple reality of hard work. Now, yes, people in a moment of time, in an instant, through pain or discouragement, can decide to change. But then comes a long process of laying down habits that will support that change and make it enduring. Productive habits don't enslave us. Of course they don't. They free us. However, for us to have productive change, we need to cultivate the right kinds of habits. Children often are more resilient than adults because they're not afraid to fail. Adults learn to fear failure through setbacks and defeats, and the result is they don't try new things. We become comfortable and begin to rot on the vine, so to speak. We stop growing, and instead our capacities begin to decline. Rather than pushing and increasing our capacities, we begin to erode our effectiveness unconsciously in the world. We naturally embrace comfort and ease. Of course we do. And before we know it, we've dug a deep hole for ourselves in terms of our energy, a lack of it, and our capacities. And when we do that, it seems almost impossible to dig our way back out. So to fight this trend, we need to train resiliency principles into our lives. Resilience and the ability to tap into our gifts and abilities will allow us to make a difference, not just in our own lives, but in this world. So with this context in mind, it's important that we think of ourselves as being beginners. We call it the beginner's mind through our whole life, taking risks and trying new things. Eric Greitens believes that part of resilience training is the cultivation of something very old-fashioned called the virtues. I'll talk about what they are in a minute. If not practiced, the virtues will die with the lack of use. The virtues are the prerequisite for resiliency and for you to accomplish your purpose in a world full of resilience. Or not resilience, but resistance. Virtues like patience and grit and perseverance, humility, need to be worked on and developed. They don't come naturally. Purposeful learning and application should be a lifelong endeavor every single day. Every master needs to be a student of a master, and we need to find mentors and examples in this journey to the virtuous life. There's something called the virtue of resilience, which is developed through facing challenges and dealing effectively with those challenges over time. Building the virtues and resilience in particular is like the process of a vaccination. Little bouts of challenge can help to build resiliency muscles and a resiliency capacity. Ironically, protecting yourself from challenge and suffering can actually have the adverse effect of making you less resilient. Self-respect doesn't come from unfounded praise or the notion that everyone's a winner. Part of loving someone is allowing them to experience hurt and pain in a supportive and loving way. Self-respect grows through self-created success. Where you can soak and bathe in that builds self-esteem. When we face a challenge, work hard, overcome, and achieve. We know inside that we did it. Our self-worth doesn't have to come from meaningless encouragement based on false praise. It was based on real effort, real accomplishment. With good intentions, our culture has moved to this extreme caution side of the pendulum, when in fact it needs to move the other direction, because challenge does build resilience and increase capacity. It's important to remind yourself that resiliency is not a lone wolf activity, however. Resiliency is a trait that is cultivated by sinking down deep roots in the soil of security. Great risk takers have placed priority on retreating to safe sanctuaries, their homes, their spouses, their families, and friends. Excellence flows from the days, weeks, months, and years of consistent effort, but you also need a supportive retreat to keep this effort going. Well, that concludes this edition of the Take Charge or Change podcast. I hope that this podcast stimulated a little bit of thought and maybe create a desire for you to embrace this notion of resiliency training. If you want to go down this journey to increase resiliency and effectiveness, both professionally and personally, I'd encourage you to download the free ebook on our website, The Resilient Professional, 15 chapters of content with practical reflection exercises and information to improve your physical, your emotional, relational, financial, and ultimately professional resilience. I'm wishing you all the best in your quest to enhance resilience.